It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that wanted to know more about sex worker rights and decided to go ask Alice. I'm Christy Powell. My co-host tonight is here to do what the Dormouse said, Vila Bianca.
Hello, everybody.
And returning tonight to chase rabbits and feed our head, Miss Alice Little. Alice, thanks for falling down the rabbit hole with us again tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here and see you all. I can't wait.
All right. Well, I am so excited about tonight's episode. I'm just going to say this as a journalism person, like this is my jam, and I'm so excited. If you are interested in what we're talking about tonight, if you have questions for Alice, if you have questions for Christy and me, call the show at 512-991-9242. Or you can call from your computer for free anywhere in the world at tiny.cc/callsex. And before we get into the regular broadcast, we do want to make a little bit of a special announcement here. The ACA is currently helping to raise funds for Black Nonbelievers, a 501c3 organization like the Atheist Community of Austin. And here's a video from their founder, Mandisa Thomas, to tell you a little bit more about it.
Hello, everyone. Mandisa Thomas here, asking you to join the Atheist Community of Austin in supporting Black Nonbelievers, also commonly known as BN. In case you aren't already familiar with us, Black Nonbelievers is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Headquartered in the Atlanta area, we connect with other Blacks and allies who are living free of religion by providing a caring, friendly, and informative environment. Instead of accepting dogma, we determine truth and morality through reason and evidence. The mission of Black Nonbelievers is to provide secular fellowship, nurture and support nonbelievers in coming out, i.e. open identification, promoting pride in the atheist/secular identities, and organizing members for a variety of events and charitable causes. Black Nonbelievers welcomes all regardless of age, gender identity, sexual identity, national origin, and racial identity. 2021 will mark 10 years of us building community, increasing the representation of the Black non-religious demographic, and advocating for true religious freedom. And we need you to help us to continue and expand on our work. For more information, please visit our website at blacknonbelievers.org. Also, please do follow and subscribe to us on social media. You may find us at Facebook at Black Nonbelievers, on Instagram at B Nonbelievers Inc., Twitter at B Nonbelievers with the B and the N capitalized, and YouTube at Black Nonbelievers Inc. Finally, we hope that you will join us in person or online for our major events, including this year's 10th anniversary celebration, which will take place from January 15th through the 17th in New Orleans. You can register to attend virtually for only $5. And of course, we hope you will consider a support donation to help make this the best hybrid event of the year. We will also be hosting the 2021 Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference in Chicago in September, and BNCCon, our cruise convention, in November. All safety and social distancing guidelines will be followed. So please donate to the link provided and do continue to support the great work of the ACA. Welcome to 2021, and I hope that we all have a great year.
All right. Well, a great organization. It's good to see Mandisa on the show again, kind of.
Yeah.
I think we may be overdue to host her again, but definitely want to encourage people to check that out. In the meantime, let's jump into the
Sounds
interview.
good
Yeah.
to me. Alice, you ready?
Yeah, let's go for it. Let's have us a tea party.
Right? Yeah. We're going to be getting into it a little bit, right? This all started. I mean, we've been looking for an excuse, if I'm honest, to get you back here on the show.
Oh.
But about a month ago, when I saw all of these headlines about the lawsuit that you had filed against the governor of Nevada, felt like it was way overdue. So give us the kind of broad strokes. Tell us a little bit about your suit, if you would.
Oh, that little thing. Oh,
That little thing, yeah.
Well, I decided to sue the governor of Nevada in order to get the legal brothels of Nevada reopened. Right now, virtually every other industry in the state is open, albeit with some modifications. However, the ranches have remained closed for this entire time. That, coupled with the fact that sex workers were ineligible for SBA loans, paycheck protection loans, any sort of small business offerings from the government, we needed to do something. And so I decided to do something and took it upon myself to sue the governor of Nevada.
Yeah,
Wow.
not a small task. I mean, that's a lot to take on. I just want to say, I guess, thank you for maybe stepping up to the plate. I'm curious how this impacts other sex workers and what that would really look like for folks not named in the suit.
Well, I structured the suit in such a way that if guests or other folks wanted to join in, that they would have the opportunity and option to do so. However, even with no one signing on to the suit, if it were to be successful, it would result in the reopening of Nevada's brothels, which would allow not just myself to get back to work, but my coworkers, as well as the ranch employees, the majority of which at this point have now been laid off.
Yeah, so this isn't just about damages. This is about overturning these orders and finding perhaps a little bit of justice or equality for sex workers, yeah?
Absolutely, yes. It comes down to that we need to survive. There is only one state of the 50 that has legalized sex work, and how awful would it be to lose that and no longer have that as a part of our country? If the legal brothels go away, there is no more legal sex work in America anywhere to be seen, and I find that to be really problematic. And now we're coming up on a year of these places being closed. How long before people start questioning, do we just leave them closed forever? Do we leave them closed for good? Who knows what happens as a result? We've literally never been closed since we were first legalized in 1970.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and the thing that really bugs me about all of this, apart from the fact that it does, at least seems to me, to be blatant discrimination, is the fact that there are very many people who are going to try and like poo-poo the concerns and be like, oh, well, you're reading into things, or clearly this isn't motivated by any kind of religious fundamentalism or puritanical hangups that Americans have. This is just a coincidence, or, this one little legal, jot and tittle. But I think just considering the climate that we find ourselves in today at the beginning of 2021, it's so very clear what is happening in the U.S. as far as Christian nationalism being pushed on the rest of us. American Atheists just recently put out a list of new legislation that Christian nationalist groups are going to be pushing in 2021 in order to further radicalize the courts. And I think at this point, there is a direct correlation here, right? This is not paranoia. This is not us making things up. This is not anything other than calling this what it is, which is religious discrimination.
I agree entirely. If in Nevada it's legal to gamble and it's legal to smoke indoors, why can't sex workers do something with modifications in order to get back to work?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's an important thing to highlight here. Like, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, my reading of your suit made it pretty clear you aren't arguing that COVID isn't potentially a good reason to close businesses, but rather that singling out brothels while reopening massage parlors, tattoo shops, hair and nail salons. I mean, all of that makes this very arbitrary and discriminatory. I mean, do I have that right?
Absolutely so. It ends up being just a massive, massive problem in the sense that, well, if we're the only thing that's closed down and everything else gets to remain open, we're being put at a very significant disadvantage to be able to survive this pandemic. That, and like I mentioned earlier, we were excluded from the other forms of financial benefits that were offered to other industries. I
Right.
personally have not seen a single dime of COVID related relief money, but I lost my entire income as a result.
Yeah, so it's not just we don't want these open, it's we don't want these open, and also we're not going to give back the tax dollars that you pay into the system in order to get you through this.
It's very disheartening. It's very stigmatizing. It's hurtful, but I can't say it's surprising. I can't say it's surprising in the slightest. This is what sex workers have been saying for the longest time, that when we allow different entities to enter into our legal system and make choices, moral choices for people without giving them the option to choose for themselves, it hurts all of us. And right now, sex workers are the ones who are suffering.
Yeah, I feel like you can't get online without reading some think piece about how COVID is going to revolutionize a particular industry. And, whether we're talking about like the way that we release films and sort of our relationship with movie theaters or ways that we've transitioned restaurants and things like that. It terrifies me a little bit, honestly, to hear you speak as if this could potentially be the end or the end as we know it of legalized prostitution in America. How realistic or current do those fears feel right now?
Pretty relevant, especially as we're approaching almost the 1 year anniversary of the last time the places were legally opened. I wonder how long can all of these locations hold on for, especially with no business relief or alternatives for opening. I mean,
Yeah.
for God's sakes, let us do something like Boober Eats. We'll go deliver food and lingerie. Like, give us something. Give us any option to survive. That's all we want to do here, is survive the pandemic like everyone else. Of course, it's easy to say the best solution is everyone stays home. Great. Well, then let's pay everyone so they can stay home. But if we're not going to pay people to stay home, then we need to have a way to survive through this. And with sex stigma being so prevalent, many of my coworkers have been on the receiving end of extreme discrimination when it comes to applying for other jobs in other industries. It's
Yeah.
easy to say, just go do something else. Well, when something else doesn't want to have you because you were a sex worker.
Absolutely.
At this stage, is there any signs of relief in sight? I mean, I know we're all watching the rollout of the vaccine, and there's a modicum of hope there, even if it's tempered with a lot of anxieties and everything else. But specific to the industry, is there any reason to believe that these things might be getting better anytime soon? Is there any relief in sight?
Unfortunately not. There's really, really nothing to look forward to on the horizon except potentially more damaging legislation that further condemns sex workers and scares us off of the only venue we can still legally purvey our services on, the internet.
Mhm. What have you heard as you've been pursuing this? I mean, why is sex work different from massage or any of these other categories? What kind of responses have you been seeing, legally or even just in conversation?
A lot of it has to do with the regulatory boards in regards to massage parlors, and those regulatory boards exist at a state level rather than a county level. Since brothels are legalized at a county level, it would be extremely difficult to have a statewide board to kind of regulate the brothels when they're a county by county legislation issue. For me, this argues that we should legalize sex work at a state level and not just a county by county level, and then allow the counties to not have brothels that don't want to have brothels, but give every single county the option to have brothels. So this way we can have a regulatory board and have all of those assurances that would allow us to then get back to work.
Well, I don't want to get too speculative or catch you too off guard, but is this moment in time, this like shift in the industry, could you see it changing the discussion around legalization versus decriminalization or any other major shakeups in the industry?
I think that the next few months are going to very much shape what happens in regards to sex work in America. Legalized, decriminalized, we are very rapidly coming to a boiling point now, especially with the changeover in the administration. We are going to have some very difficult conversations that I think many Americans have been trying to avoid for a very long time, like a la ostrich with their head in the sand style. We have to talk about it. When we hear all of these buzzwords, sex work, prostitution, sex trafficking, all of the names that have now gotten involved, gosh, I mean, it's everywhere. It is pervasive within the media, and we can't just keep ignoring it. We have to do something about it and have a real nationwide conversation.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm about to hit bingo here on things that would upset my mother. But this conversation feels kind of reminiscent of the fact that poll after poll after poll seems to show that marijuana is becoming more and more accepted. But on a national and federal level, there's still all of these issues. And at a time where I feel like having an OnlyFans account or dipping your toe into professional sex work or semi-professional sex work is becoming more and more accepted. But the powers that be are honestly getting worse in many ways. It feels like the vice is tightening in a lot of ways. Do you see that on your end?
100% yes. From the legislation changes as a result of Bella Thorne scamming people on OnlyFans, to the changes that we're seeing positioned by Mitch McConnell trying to tie Section 230 to COVID relief. Like, oh, I'm sorry, that would have been like an even worse problem than SESTA and FOSTA itself was. And now we have the new little sister entering the arena, the CISA bill. It's just, oh my God, we're really getting attacked front, left, right, and center.
Yeah, how is COVID adding to those barriers? I mean, obviously, we're talking about the closing of a lot of different forms of legalized sex work, whether we're talking about strip clubs or prostitution and a number of other things. How is that pressure intensifying at this stage in the pandemic?
It's like a pressure cooker that's coming to a boil and the lid's about to blow if there isn't some relief in sight. So many people, vast majority of the industry has been affected. I would argue 95% of the industry has been negatively impacted, with perhaps primarily phone sex operators being the only group reporting benefits from the closure. Not even camp girls are necessarily having a great time right now because they can no longer travel and do collaborations or create the same type of content that they once were. It is very difficult to be a sex worker in America, let alone have that as your primary income stream, when it feels like the whole wide world, including the law, is against you.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Alice. Sorry, Christy. I'm curious because it almost feels to me like this came out of left field for the people that you took to account here. Like this feels like something that they were expecting to get away with, expecting to be able to like slip in there and not have to like worry about or have a national conversation about. Is that your sense? Is this something that they're shocked to even have to talk about?
Look at the way that our Congress critters and senators discuss things like SESTA and FOSTA. Look at the way that they wrinkle their nose when they say the word sex, the way that they say prostitute. They make like a face with it. They're so uncomfortable. They're visibly uncomfortable saying these things. I'm sorry, but if you can't handle those words, I really feel like you're not able to handle legislating around those topics in the first place, which clearly they're not ready for.
It's a good point.
I have to say, my absolute favorite part of the whole lawsuit experience was legally having to explain medical fetish to a Zoom call full of judges and lawyers, and all I see are multiple cameras of people just doing their very best to not just start giggling as we're handling this. It was a real treat for me, I have to say. It finished 2020 off in style.
Oh my goodness.
I can only imagine the ones with tells that you're like, oh, that guy gets it. He knows. He doesn't want anybody else to know that he knows, but we know that he knows.
It was very entertaining, to say the least. Some of the topics and services having to be discussed in court. Sex positions entered the equation at one point. So
Right.
describe for the court exactly what is doggy style. Oh, Your Honor, it would be my delight. I can't wait to read the transcript of that. I mean,
That is beautiful. Is that a public thing? Because
I sure hope so. Or if I can legally make it public, I will make it public. I would assume that it has to be public record, but I mean,
oh my goodness,
some of those lines.
We should
I
have
was
a
just about to
dramatic-
say, we need to have Seraphine on for another dramatic reading. That sounds like a very good time. And it really does beg the question. I know we're talking around this, and I know there's not one simple answer, but this show is clearly not the first or only one to point out that, breaking your back in a factory that you don't own is no less selling your body than running an OnlyFans or any of these other things. So why do we still get YouTube comments saying that, sex work is not real work?
Religious stigma, dogma, media, propagation of horrible stereotypes, the refusal of celebrities to come out and speak openly about their own sex work experiences. Granted, that last one is slowly but surely starting to change, bless Cardi B. But also, we need more of that. We need vocal allies in major spaces and more of them. We need lawyers and doctors. We need 24 more AOCs. Like, we gotta get there. That's what we need.
Yeah. Do you feel, as the conversation sort of shifts back and forth and we see this boiling point and this huge division between our lawmakers and their constituency, is there any reason to believe that the national conversation is shifting in the direction that it needs to?
Slowly. I don't think we're going to be there quite yet. We're ready to talk about it for the first time and have that baby level entry conversation. Much in the same way that as a country, we've been kind of dancing with marijuana for almost 15 to 20 years now, going through the motions of are we not, are we okay with it? We're about to start that 10 to 20 year dance with sex work, I think, where we're going to entertain the idea, we're going to dance around with it, we're going to parade it, and then we're going to put it back in the filing cabinet for another 4 years, and then we're going to take it out and we're going to parade it around, but this time with a different hat on its head, and then maybe we'll slowly but surely make progress, and it's going to take the presentation of it again and again and again and again and again and again and many, many, many more times, which is one of the reasons why I felt it was so important to file the suit in the first place. We need more documented cases about sex work, arguing in support of it. We need those accounts legally to create standing and basis for future cases. So, I mean, it in some ways is a win no matter what, because the courts agreed to hear the case. They could have thrown it out, but they chose to hear it anyway. So that's something, damn it.
They wanted to get a little more info on Doggy Style.
Apparently, oh God, could you imagine?
It's the only way they have access without feeling guilty about it.
Oh God,
I do want to point out
that makes so much sense now. It was just like a secret sex ed session. That's what was happening there.
I need to relate to the kids. I do want to point out this book, which is something that it changed my perception of the conversation around sex in America. It's Sex and the Constitution by Jeffrey Stone, and it is really well done. And it documents how religion specifically has influenced our laws and our constitutional interpretations around things like sex work, around feminism in general, around abortion, all of these topics that are related to sex, and gives you that really big, broad bird's eye view of things. So for anyone out there who's interested in learning more about this, who may be grappling with this idea that legislatively we are biased against the concept of sex as a country, this is a really good starting place, and it's very well written. So highly recommend. This is a good beach read that'll get you looks.
A good beach read for sure. Well, I'll make sure to have links to that in the show notes for this episode. And I, of course, want to remind folks that we are still available here at 512-991-9242. If you'd like to give us a call, if you want to weigh in about any of this or anything else that might be on your mind. But I'm really curious, Alice, what the reaction has been to your suit. You know, what kinds of things you've been hearing. You're already like very publicly centered and sort of a face of the industry, but I can only imagine that this was a bit of a lightning rod experience. I mean, did you attract wanted or unwanted attention as you were raising these issues?
It was a mixed bag for sure. A little good, a little bad, a little shocking. Unfortunately, we've decided to polarize and politicize COVID-19. And so this became an extension of that continued conversation, which is ironic because I do not identify any sort of political motivation in either direction with this suit. There was no politics involved here, and yet 9 out of every 10 conversations I had dove right into the politics of businesses being opened or closed. And that's not the conversation that we should be necessarily having in regards to this. I thought it really problematic that rather than letting this be a lightning rod for sex workers' rights and our ability to survive this, instead it kind of turned into a little bit of a continuation of the political showboat that we've already have seen and we're all sick and tired of.
Yeah, yeah, please, Vee, go right ahead.
It's interesting that, and this is, I feel like this is a symptom, and I know I'm waxing a little bit philosophical here, so forgive me, but I do know that this feels like a symptom of that dualistic kind of thinking, that very black and white, this or that, one or the other kind of worldview that a lot of Americans seem to have about a variety of topics, good or bad, this liberal or conservative, and if it's not one, it has to be the other. And so you look at it as something like this, which is very practical, which is very, frankly, more of a libertarian, I would even say, lawsuit in terms of, hey, this is me, this is my body, this is my job, give me what the freedom to do what I want to do in order to make money. They look at that and they go, well, that can't be a GOP thing, right? That can't be a Republican thing because it's talking about sex. So by default, it must be some kind of liberal progressive agenda, which it isn't either, right? It's just it's people expressing their needs in the legal way. And yeah, I don't know. I'm consistently and forever always annoyed at this dichotomy, black and white kind of situation that dualism presents.
it's toxic when we feel the need to make absolutist statements about any topic, any aspect of our society. All sex workers must be this. All people with beards must be that. We end up being wrong about 50% of the time. Could we get some of it right? Sure, I'm sure statistically some of it is accurate, but certainly not the whole of it. And when we paint things with these broad strokes, we miss all of the nuances and the detail. And oftentimes that's really where justice and liberty tends to live, is in the nuances and in the details. Why is this suit important? What is the reason behind the ranches being closed? How come they can't open, but more intimate industries arguably can? It certainly would be riskier to get a tattoo right now than it would be to see a sex worker. We all know that when you get a tattoo, it lowers your immune system, but we're okay with that. It's riskier to smoke right now. We know that it's related to the lungs, and it's very, very dangerous, in fact, to smoke. But we haven't outlawed cigarettes. In fact, we still allow people to smoke cigarettes inside of casinos in Nevada. So it's just, it's very double, triple standard here. And it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it does make a lot of sense in terms of money, as far as the casinos are a valuable industry, and comparatively, the rather small legal sex work industry is not nearly as large.
Interesting. This is, this week is interesting. This is an interesting week.
This whole year already.
This whole week of a year.
This one that just started already feels a full year long. But I am curious about the continued shifts in the industry. As one of the faces of legal prostitution, I am very interested to hear how you feel watching more and more people kind of dip their toes into that type of like secondary income, part-time sort of sex work, and if that might be a engine for changing things here.
I'm kind of two minds with it. I'm optimistic, but also wary. I'm optimistic because this looks like us having more allies, which is a great thing for the industry. The more, the merrier. My concern, however, is that many of the folks who are just kind of dipping their toe in may not be aware of the ramifications of sex stigma and how that could affect them for the rest of their lives. For example, if you work at a brothel, even for just 2 weeks, it could show up on a security clearance 10 years down the line. That's very, very long reaching for a 2-week-long decision. My fear is that the same thing will hold true with some of these online medias. We know that when something is on the internet, it lives on the internet forever. No matter how hard we try to delete it or scrub it, once it is online, it is out there, and God only knows where it will end up. So for someone to enter sex work casually and put their face out there, they could risk losing their primary form of income, such as the EMT in New York. Granted, They vocally said that they're not interested in no longer having her work there. They came out in support of her, but the fact that she was risked in the first place for having an OnlyFans is ridiculous. And the fact that was a big deal story is also ridiculous. The fact that we're sensationalizing an EMT doing sex work. For God's sakes, I'm one of 3 EMTs I know that do sex work, but you don't see a big scandaloso article about that. Oh no, because sex work somehow in our society is still taboo enough to warrant headlines, to warrant media. Not when sex workers do sex work, however, but when somebody else does sex work, Bella Thorne, an EMT, whichever, whatever. We talk about it like it's the most groundbreaking, incredible thing, when it's something that's been happening for a very long time, and folks that represent that have been in the industry for a very long time too.
That's a really good point. That reminds me of the big to-do about Harry Styles wearing a dress. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, why? It's nice that you care, I guess, but also like, I don't know. Like there, yeah,
what are we supposed to do with that?
Yeah, right. Like, okay, so do you support trans people now, or is it only cool because it's Harry Styles? Like there is that dichotomy between a celebrity doing a transgressive thing, and people who just are that thing. And yeah, I don't know. I think part of my question, and Christy, I'm curious about your thoughts on this as well. Do you think that part of the reason that sex work as kind of that compound word, that concept, one of the reasons that that's so traumatizing for people, or triggering, traumatizing is probably not the right word, but triggering and upsetting, is because we still tend to view sex as this like sacred, untouchable thing. And so to make something that is supposedly sacred and of God into work, there's an aspect there that is uncouth in some way, or maybe even blasphemous. I'm wondering if there's a connection there. What do you guys think?
I think that there absolutely is. And I'm going to answer it from the standpoint of a few different sex workers I've spoken to and who have shared their thoughts on it. There seems to be this mythology that sex work is only acceptable if the sex worker views this as being some part of their greater purpose for being here, their life's mission, that it has to be more than just a job, that it has to be ultimately fulfilling, and the main reason for your existence is to fulfill this role, and anything less than that makes the job less acceptable, when we don't expect that same kind of dedicated response from literally any other profession. Just because I find sex work to be fulfilling doesn't mean that all sex workers do, nor must they inherently find it fulfilling in order for it to still be a job. I mean, sex work is work. Being a teacher is work. Being a therapist is work. Being a doctor, oh my God, is being a doctor work? Oh my goodness, that's incredible work. It can be fulfilling work. It could be challenging work, but it is work. Why is sex work different?
Yeah, and I'll say that certainly just the word sex, the notion of sex, I mean, that carries a lot, and people bring to the table a lot of assumptions about what that's supposed to be and how it's supposed to look. But even in a broader sense, I feel like people are largely uncomfortable with commodified relationships. And we can tie that into a like very heteronormative patriarchal society that sort of puts things into very particular conventions and says, this type of relationship looks like this, that type of relationship looks like that. You have to be monogamous, you have to be straight, you have to be this, that, and the other. And we really hamstring ourselves with these societal conventions that say all relationships need to look a particular way. And I feel like that discomfort is part of what is at play here. I mean, I made this comparison last time you were on, Little, and Alice, and I don't mean to overstress it, but we both work in situations where people pay us to be in a relationship with them. And that's very different than what most people are comfortable with. Nobody likes to really conceptualize their therapy that way. They don't like to think of any relationship as being tied to money, because money is the root of all evil. And we're supposed to pretend that money is wrong and that it's bad and that it corrupts. And that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. But I think that the money part of sex work, the work part of sex work, is as uncomfortable for a lot of folks as the sex part of sex work is. I don't know. Does that feel fair to either?
Very, very, very fair. And it's funny you say like money being the root of all evil. Well, I think it all depends on how do you framework money. Are you buying a relationship, or are you using something that our society has deemed to be an asset to show your appreciation for that person's contribution in your life? When I purchase artwork, I'm not buying a painting. I am paying that artist for their labor, for their creation, and my appreciation of that. So this way I can take that object home and then admire it, and it adds value to my life. When you pay a therapist, you are paying for your appreciation of the value that they are bringing to your life. So produce is the same thing. You are paying for the apple. You are buying that farmer's labor. You are paying for him to go out there and water the tree and harvest the apple and put it in a box and put it on a truck and take it to the grocery store. And then you're paying for the grocery store workers, labor to unpack it and then ring you. It's all labor. It's all the same thing. It doesn't matter what you're buying. You're paying for work that someone has done that brings value to your life. I mean, what that is going to be different, but why are we treating it as if some is different than others?
Mm-hmm. Not just different, but inherently better or worse too.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think it ties to just sort of the alienation and sort of the way that we view money, not as a result of labor, but as this kind of distinct enterprise. And I feel like I could go down that rabbit hole with y'all all night. I want to give V a chance to jump into the phones real quickly, but Alice, I cut you off. Let me give you a moment to jump in here.
Oh, the only thing I was going to add to that is oftentimes the controls around relationships speak to the insecurities around sex and sex acts. We know that the church isn't comfortable with homosexual sex acts, and so therefore a relationship must be between a man and a woman so we can control that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this is the... It's not surprising. It's disheartening, but not surprising that this is something that is so contentious because it feels like it sits at the center of so many different overlapping hangups that we have as a country. And so unless we address literally this entire Venn diagram of everything else that's underlying it, it's going to be really difficult to actually get to the root of this and get people the money they need to survive. All right, let's talk with Keith. Keith, welcome to the show.
Hello, Christy V and Alice. How's it going?
Going good. How are you? What can we help you with tonight?
Hey, yeah, I just had a question for Alice. In your experience, like, do you get a lot of people who are virgins or who are prevented from being able to really have sexual relationships because of religious pressures and stuff? And like, is that a super uncomfortable thing for you guys? Or like, how does that sort of situation go?
Yes, so I've worked with a large number of virgins in general, and within that, a fair number have actually been folks that have come from religiously suppressive backgrounds that didn't allow them to start to explore intimacy or sexuality. I've had a number of women come and see me that never learned how to masturbate before. I've had men come to me that have to unlearn some of the morality notions around sex and whether it's okay to even do these things in the first place. I'm personally very comfortable having those conversations and helping somebody kind of unpack through that. But I always ask that folks share as much as they are willing to up front. This way I can do my homework, look into whatever the religion happens to so be. So this way we can kind of walk into the scenario on the same page a bit more.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not something that you would say is like super uncomfortable for the sex worker or anything like that? It doesn't...
I can't speak for everyone, but the best way to kind of find out whether someone is comfortable with that or not would be to simply write an email kind of explaining a bit about what it is you're looking for and mention that that's part of what you're looking to unpack with them and make sure that they're comfortable, consenting, hopefully a bit knowledgeable about it or willing to go and get the knowledge to then be able and help you along that journey.
Okay, cool. Thank you for answering my question.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in, Keith. We appreciate hearing from you.
Always.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
You too.
Once again, it ultimately comes down to communicate, express your concerns, express your needs. When it comes to sex, talk. Your mouth is the most important sexual organ. I'm gonna think about that one for a little bit. I'll think about it later. Yeah, so we touched on it a little bit, but I definitely wanted to talk to you about the Stop Internet Sexual Exploitation Act, SSIA, that is working its way through Congress right now. What do we need to know about the supposed problem here and the solution that's being proposed through this bill?
So the problem is kind of a largely imaginary one. The problem, SSIA, to explain, it stands for the Stop Internet Sexual Exploitation Act. This is the little sister to SESTA and FOSTA, the Stop. What was SESTA? Oh God, there's too many acronyms. Too many acronyms. Another one was like a Stop Sexual Exploitation Trafficking Act. That was SESTA. There we go. It's ridiculous. The problem is that there is no ability to legislate sex trafficking out of existence. The only way that we can legislate it out of existence is by legislating sex work into existence. And this is seeking to do exactly the opposite of that. It is seeking to further endanger sex workers, push them underground, and it's requiring websites to obtain further information from sex workers, which frankly speaking could be used against us. It could be exploited, it could be hacked, it could be made public, which sounds paranoid, but has already happened before on countless occasions. We know that the more documentation that's collected on sex workers, it doesn't actually protect sex workers, it furthers endangers sex workers. Not to mention the fact that cracking down and putting further limitations and barriers to accessing sex work on the internet doesn't help anybody. It just endangers sex workers, and it actually pushes genuine sex trafficking victims further and further underground, so this way we can never find them to help them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing ripples of this just as it is proposed. And, you know, seeing the mass deletion on Pornhub and some of these other things that are going on. I'm curious about what you sort of see, or what sex worker and advocacy groups are saying will happen next if this does pass.
The concern is that we will essentially get censored off of the internet. There will be so much red tape to having sex workers on a platform that more and more places are going to just simply kick sex workers to the curb, much in the same way that Tumblr did. Tumblr had a very thriving adult community, incredibly prolific, all over the place in terms of different niches, and those communities were utterly decimated and destroyed just as soon as Tumblr decided to just kick them to the curb. But we're not talking about internet communities here. We're talking about people's livelihoods. We're talking about people's careers and their ability to put food on the table. That's what we're looking at destroying now. And suddenly it gets real and it gets personal and it endangers so many people.
You know, it strikes me that any other small business community being impacted this heavily by the government would be the poster child for the small government Republicans. No, like this would be the issue that they went to bat for over and over again if it was literally anything else.
Literally anything else. Anything else under the sun would have better luck than sex work. And it's just so unfortunate because sex work is no less of a worthy cause. And if anything, it's shown its value throughout history to the societies that choose to have sex work within them. We know that it benefits communities. It covers something like 30% of Lyon County's discretionary funds, especially in a time right now where we are once again, as a country, hurting for money real bad. Imagine if we responded to the pandemic with increased legalization and taxes on sex work and marijuana. And while we're at it, let's just decriminalize all sorts of things. I mean, we could really make tremendous headway in a short period of time and recoup a lot of the taxation dollars that we desperately need in order to fuel our economy and give it a boost.
Yeah. So as this is working its way through Congress, what should any of us listening be doing to have an impact here?
Call your senators and your congressmen, make them aware of this, and let them know that you do not support this. It is highly problematic. It further endangers sex workers. And at the same time, please take the time to educate them on the dangers of SESTA and FOSTA and encourage them to vote against those measures the next time that they appear in court. Because it's not just about laying the foundational work for one issue. Make it a two-punch blow. Cover both issues in one letter. Do twice the work in one, because it will definitely pay off in the long term. The more allies that we can win across the government, the better. Now, of course, the best thing, greatest thing that anybody listening could do is get involved in your local politics at any level. At any level at all whatsoever. City Congress, run for a council position, run to be the dog catcher, get involved with politics, start working your way up through the ranks, because if we want real change, we have to be the change. If we're going to get this former generation out of office and start filling it with more progressive, forward-thinking minds, well, guess what? That's all of us. That's everybody listening, everyone having these conversations. Just don't have the conversations. Walk the walk too. Do the politics. Shoot, if I could get involved with politics, I would. But I'm kind of a sex worker, so that's a gigantic strike against me. But I will support the crap out of anyone else who does want to get involved with politics. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so call your representatives, talk to them about the Stop Internet Sexual Exploitation Act, about SESTA FOSTA. You know, if they're interested, walk them through what a medical fetish is, or like how doggy style works, or any of those
just
pieces.
hold their hand a little bit. It's a-okay.
So I've got a quick question for you, and then I do know that we do have another caller on the line that I'd love to get to.
Please.
This is something that I experienced during back in 2020. I think it was 2020. Were the Democratic primaries in 2020? I don't remember.
Were
Jesus
they?
Christ, who remembers? 2020 part 2?
Anyway, no, it was 2019. In 2019, thank goodness, I was at a Warren rally, and the very last person to come up and ask a question was a reporter who was asking about SESTA FOSTA and what Warren's stance on it was. And for me, she didn't give a good answer, right? She was very kind of, tiptoe around it, kind of dismissive, and also admitted that she didn't know very much about it. And then literally maybe like a week or two later, I follow her on Twitter, and she had tweeted, "I just researched SESTA FOSTA. This is horrible. I don't support this. Here's why." And she actually did show that process of kind of, being educated, being willing to do that research and turning around on the subject, at least substantially, if not, completely. And I'm wondering, am I understanding that correctly? Is there in the sex work industry with your coworkers, was that something that you guys noticed? Is that kind of the direction we should be trying to push? Just kind of slowly educating through asking those questions and going to these rallies and being present.
Yes, and yes, and yes, 100 times over. We need to talk about sex workers positively in a non-stigmatized way. We need to ask the hard questions and expect answers. We need to follow up if we don't get satisfactory answers. But most importantly, we cannot make enemies of potential allies. We need to win people over, not attack people for being uneducated. If someone says they don't know, we don't slam them for not knowing. We provide them the tools to educate themselves with. We have to be both advocate and ally. We have to handhold as many people through this process, this unlearning of sex stigma, if we are going to win the long-term battle.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump to calls super quick. Let's talk with JB in Canada. JB, welcome to the show.
Hi.
How can we help you tonight? Hi.
Hey, I'm all right. How are you?
Doing good. It says here you wanted to celebrate something with us.
Yeah. So my new year, I guess, came off to a good start because I did it. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I came out to a couple of friends as trans FTM.
Nice.
Hey,
Congratulations.
It was the best thing because it was like as casual as it could possibly be, which I think was the best way that I could have done it.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I basically just asked them like if they would still be friends with me if I was a dude, and their only concern was that I don't become like an asshole, like some dude.
Like a real broy, douchey dude. Right? Yeah.
That is so awesome, JB.
May that be
I'm
true
so
of all
happy.
of us.
Right, yes. No excuses for being an asshole, unless you actually are.
No, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Did you also have a question for Alice tonight?
Yeah. I just was wondering like how the sex work industry is able to follow COVID regulations. It just seems like a very difficult industry to be able to do that in, I guess.
Yes. So in regards to COVID restrictions with the brothels, it's important to know that sex workers are already tested every 7 days for STDs and STIs. And so part of the proposal for reopening the ranches included regular COVID testing at that same weekly interval. In addition to that, we would be doing COVID questionnaires at the door, have social distancing in all public spaces, have the bar remain closed, have alcohol and hand sanitizer available at the entryway of all of the rooms, have temperature checks at the front door, and then limit the number of parties that each sex worker could potentially be having to just having appointments only. So this way everything can be appropriately spaced out. Ultimately, the hope is that any number of those measures would be able to be combined to kind of cause like the Swiss cheese effect, where the more protections we have in place, the better protected we actually are. And so the industry very much so was willing to open with any and all requirements, such as mask wearing, whatever it so may be.
How does that strike you, JB? Are you still on the line with us? All right. Well, I hear just the amount of effort and the specificity that you're talking about. I mean, my partner and I actually did recently get tattoos, and we went to a parlor by appointment with somebody that we had already had a relationship with, and followed all of those mandates, and we felt very safe. But in that conversation and just getting a little bit better understanding of the industry, we were a little uncomfortable to realize like just how casually or perhaps carelessly those COVID-19 restrictions were being applied across the industry. And I don't mean to make a casual conversation that I happen to be a part of as like an indictment on the way that we've managed this crisis overall. But I do want to point out that there's a lot of that going on, and it feels incredibly frustrating to just recognize the arbitrary and discriminatory practices that you've been facing.
Yeah, it's a very nuanced topic. No one's interested in making light of COVID-19, least of all myself. It's real. Mask wearing and social distancing is important. If you're not feeling well, stay home. But at the same time, we are social animals. It is in our DNA. It is in our blood. We are not designed to be isolated. People are going to start making their own personal choices based off of their own personal risk levels. We didn't criminalize casual dating through the pandemic. And what that looks like is doing casual dating through means of having a COVID consent conversation. what is your risk? Have you traveled? Are you comfortable meeting? Have you met with other people this week? Who else have you been in contact with? Are any of those people at risk? And it's no different than any other consent conversation. It's just happening in a different topic, and whether we like it or not, it's a skill all of us are going to need to exercise for at least a few months longer.
JB, did we get you back on the line?
Hey, yeah, I'm back. I think it cut out like halfway through your answer the first time around, but you make a really good point about like the casual dating thing, because like that, like obviously that's not something that like can technically like really be criminalized, or like, I mean, it can be frowned upon, but they can't really like just shut it down the way they can with sex work, which is like, if you're taking all the precautions, it doesn't seem like necessary or fair to be so I don't know, so like gatekeepy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a fair consideration. I mean, just being a therapist, being, kind of privy to some of people's sexual secrets and stories, I've definitely had a lot of conversations with some folks who have made some pretty questionable Tinder decisions throughout this pandemic. And, no judgment, that's a part of life, and everybody can be responsible to mitigate those risks. But the idea of a regulated industry not having that same opportunity is very frustrating. So thank you so much for calling, JB. I'm sorry if we kind of got off track because of the technical issues. Did you have any other questions or anything else we can take care of tonight?
No, I think that's all for now. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for calling in, and congratulations again on coming out to your friends and having them be supportive. That's wonderful, and we're all so happy to hear it. So thank you for calling in with good news. We love it when our callers do that. All right.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Have a good one.
All right. We do have another caller. Would you like to take John from Texas?
Yeah, let's talk to him.
Absolutely. All right. John in Texas, welcome to the show. How can we help you tonight?
Hi there. So I guess a little prelude question for Alice. I know there can be some overlap between sex workers and at least, seeing what happens with sex trafficking, like kind of in your area. Is that something that you see a lot of or are a little more personally familiar with as a result of your work, or is it still pretty distant from you and something you would have to keep up with news-wise?
It is absolutely something that I choose to keep up with news-wise. As a sex worker, I'm adamantly against sex trafficking, and so I help out with a number of anti-sex trafficking organizations. But in terms of closeness due to my industry, not at all, which frankly speaks to the difference between sex work and sex trafficking, in that I really don't see a lot of overlap.
For sure. Okay. So in that case, the question is a little more kind of directed to everybody. One of the things that people don't always talk about a lot is that immigration law actually has a really negative effect on sex trafficking. That being that because there are a lot of these people who are being trafficked by organizations like the cartel, for instance, that have all of this money and ability to essentially get people over here legally, but then put them in a situation where they're here illegally and can't go to the authorities for fear of being deported. They're now in a situation where they're being trafficked, but can't possibly get to recourse without going to a worse life situation. So I'm just kind of curious what your guys' kind of thoughts in general on that are.
Well, I can speak from the standpoint of volunteering with a number of different anti-sex trafficking organizations, in that in the spectrum of where sex trafficking is occurring, the immigration related concerns specifically have been made worse by SESTA and FOSTA because they've been pushed further underground. Whereas previously one might have come across an ad on a website like Backpage that was advertising a situation that didn't sound quite right. Now that ad no longer exists, and so it's being spread by word of mouth, and it's far harder to reach that. But the greater spectrum of sex trafficking, the immigration section actually represents perhaps one of the smallest slices of where sex trafficking is actually occurring and how it's occurring.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I mean, that was really my whole question. I'm a little curious if V and Christy have anything to say on it.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me. And I think that this is, again, these are groups of people who we don't consider to be, worthy of our full attention. And so it doesn't surprise me that the immigrant population and the people who are being trafficked for sex, which again is a different conversation, is
right.
That overlap definitely makes sense to me. And nobody is being helped in this situation, right? This is a bad rule all around that doesn't have an upside, really, apart from making us feel better about ourselves from a weird, twisted, puritanical angle. So in the terms of real human cost, it's sunk.
Yeah, I mean, only to say that our immigration system in general is clearly broken, or perhaps from another angle, is working exactly as it's intended to, which is to let in the types of folks that a very specific subset of our population approves of and demonize the rest. And so the fact that there is exploitation, the fact that there is violence is kind of built into that system. And until we stop wringing our hands over the color of the people that are coming in, the beliefs of the people that are coming in, and actually start opening our doors in a way that makes sense, in a way that is appropriately regimented, this type of exploitation is going to continue. And the fact that it is sexually based is just a part of the fact that it is full of violence and exploitation. The sexuality aspect of it only feels relevant in the exploitation aspect of it, at least to my mind.
Yeah, that's all about as well as I could imagine hearing any of that put. And just to Alice, I would never mean to say that sex workers are inherently linked to sex trafficking, just to be super clear about that.
Oh, no, I didn't take it that way at all. No worries.
For sure. Well, thanks for taking the call.
Thank you for calling in. Have a nice night.
All right. V, do you want to take maybe one more before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think let's take Anthony in Tennessee. Anthony has a very traditional, good bones level sex question. So
let's do it.
Let's take Anthony in Tennessee. Hi, Anthony. Welcome to the show tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to form the foundation from which we can all build. I appreciate that.
Love it. Love it. What can we help you with tonight?
Yeah. Okay. So I am in a new relationship. It is a long distance relationship, and it is a COVID-19 relationship. And so my partner and I get a chance to be together every once in a while, not very often. And because of that, the pressure for everything to be super important, including the sex life, gets ratcheted up to 11. How do we tone that down so that we can just enjoy being together?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. I think it's really hard to keep anything toned down right now. It feels like everything is kind of dialed up to 11.
Heard.
And so I get that that's the mindset, right? We're coming into this and there's not a lot of certainty about tomorrow. Every day feels like a weird new trippy dream / nightmare that like, oh, and now this is happening, and now this is happening. So I get that there's this sentiment to be like, we have to make the most of every moment right now, a la Roaring Twenties. I guess we're already kind of there.
Right. Well, and then also we're a male-male relationship, and he doesn't have that much experience being in a same-sex relationship, so it's like one more thing laid on top of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are diving deep, which is good, right? Like you guys are having these conversations and you're being vulnerable with each other, and you're aware of, this might be a potential issue, and how do we get in front of it? And that's very good. Oh gosh, in terms of how to dial it down, Christy, any ideas? I'm just here to empathize with Anthony in this.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, as a therapist, I definitely want to say it's valuable to embrace impermanence, to let go of some of your expectations, to just let the thing be the thing and not stress about what it should be or anything else. But as a sex therapist, I guess I really want to emphasize the idea that you can waste your entire life, your entire sex life, thinking about the sex that you're not having, or that you should be having, or that you need to be having. And I'd encourage you both instead to just enjoy the sex that you are having, whether that sex is full on, hardcore, penetrative, hot sex, or if it is really just a kiss, if it's a blowjob. I mean, whatever else is going on, there's not a need to check off a certain number of boxes or to achieve a particular type or a particular number of orgasms or whatever else. I would very much encourage y'all to enjoy your time together and know that that time doesn't need to have any sex. And if it does, that sex doesn't need to look any particular way. So, I might encourage you more than anything to just kind of take a step back. Just look at what sounds like fun. And if what sounds like fun is this incredibly elaborate and detailed scene that involves all kinds of kink and BDSM or role play and outfits and everything else, great. But the sense that I'm getting without knowing more about either of you or more about you as a couple is that maybe it's a good idea to just enjoy the odd moment that you get to spend together.
Yeah. No, that was actually really helpful. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear it.
Wonderful.
Cool.
Can we help you with anything else? Or Alice, do you want to jump in with your 2 cents here too?
I would say in regards to COVID-19 sex, we're trying to cram all of our sexuality into the moments we get to spend together. And I would suggest embracing some of those long distance sex options, such as Bluetooth sex toys, phone sex, camming, things that can help maybe like let some of the sexual steam off. So this way, when you are together, it doesn't feel like you have to suddenly do all of the things because there's other outlets outside of those limited moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just learned that Bluetooth sex toys exist, so that's a whole thing to explore.
Oh, they are fantastic. Have fun with that rabbit hole. It goes real deep.
Yeah, that little nugget might be more valuable than anything else we've shared tonight. Do some Googling, spend up, and avoid words like novelty. Get the good stuff.
Yeah, get the good stuff with the technology. It's so worth it because the bad stuff is really bad.
Uh-huh.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the insight.
Sounds good. Thanks for calling
Have
in.
a great night.
Good night.
Oh man,
Well-
hope you learned something, audience, today.
Yeah,
The more you know.
geopolitics. I don't know. Workplace alienation. I mean, we're really just kind of all over the place tonight. But thank you so much for walking us through some of these things, Alice, and sharing kind of a wide breadth of knowledge with us. know that you are kind of all over the web as Alice Little or as the Alice Little, but where would you like to point folks that might be more interested in some of your work?
Yes, best place to find me is going to be on my website, which is thealicelittle.com. Of course, you can also find me on Instagram at the Alice Little Official. I'm on Facebook as Alice Little, on Patreon as Alice Little. I do have a GoFundMe up right now for the lawsuit. It was a very incredibly expensive endeavor and has been entirely self-funded. So if anyone is motivated and able to contribute, please do feel free. It would be much appreciated. And of course, you can always email me, alicelittle@thealicelittle.com.
Wonderful. Oh my goodness. Guys, reach out, send a couple of bucks Alice's way. She's doing good work that's necessary to this global conversation, and we're going to need a lot more of it moving forward, it sounds like.
Yeah, no question.
I do want to make sure we get a shot of the crew cam up because we missed it on Talk Heathen, and I feel awful. And there they are, the beautiful, beautiful people of the ACA crew cam. Oh, Deb. Wow. It's 2021.
Thank you all so much for helping us put all this together and, shaking off the rust, getting us back into a live show as we continue to do all of this remotely and just kind of jump over the hurdles that come with another month, 6 months, year of this crazy pandemic. So I just appreciate all of the hard work that goes in here. I want to thank both of y'all for being here, as well as, of course, everybody who has joined us tonight and everybody who's called in. Please check out the links. We've got links in the show notes to this episode for all of Alice's material, as well as some of the books and other resources that we've talked about. And otherwise, I guess I want to take a moment and just encourage everybody watching to go out and give themselves a big ol' orgasm. Or better yet,
give somebody else
one.